Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another Breakfast with Blaha. And today I'm having fat-free Greek yogurt, frozen cherries, almond butter. All right, let's talk about low back weaknesses, because this is one of the most common things that I see. And it's both in terms of muscular weakness as well as lack of connective tissue and work capacity. And so this is one of the reasons with a lot of my new clients really early on, I make them do 20 rep sets of good mornings. I start them on that very early unless they don't need it. Now, if I see a lifter who already has a strong low back, they have access to stuff like a reverse hyper, they're really strong at good morning, something like that. I see evidence that it's not an issue. I don't do this to them, but otherwise I do. And a lot of my novice lifters who come to me, the first thing we do is spend several weeks doing 20 rep sets of good mornings. Usually for at least a month. I also make them do things like high rep band pull-throughs. And this is, again, one of the biggest problems we have with Doug. You guys remember Doug couldn't deadlift. All right, we got his bench up from like 305 up to 360 in less than a year. We're chatting again. He's probably going to come back on pretty soon. But we did all that. We got his squat up. His deadlift struggled, and he pulled his low back a lot. And it's because he had a history of low back issues as a result of not training his lower back. And the thing is, a lot of guys out there, they really neglect it. They think that, well, they can come in and do some squats and deadlifts that'll build it up. Maybe they'll work in some good mornings. They'll never get really strong at them. And they think that that's enough, right? This is all we need to build our lower back. And you get pretty strong while neglecting it. And that's the part that's a little bit scary about it, is that you can get pretty strong and neglect your low back. And what do I mean by pretty strong? I mean, there are people out there who squat 500 pounds who still have a weak low back. Weak relative to the rest of their body. So again, one of the things though that I have people do early on is very high rep work for it. Why? Because your erectors in that area, your entire low back, has more connective tissue in it than it does muscle. If you look at an anatomy chart, if you see anything from a cadaver, you'll notice it's tendons, tons of tendons. Well, what do we know about tendons? They have low blood flow to them. So by coming in and doing a lot of really high rep work for it, we help build blood flow, capillary beds, work capacity. And it can also help hypertrophy those tendons up a little bit because we need them thicker. And if we do this, you're going to be a lot less injury prone. It's kind of like with abs. In fact, these things should probably both be done. Some very high rep low back work combined with ab work early on in your training for a while will prevent a lot of these problems that we have. So if we see a weak low back, how do we even identify that? Well, some of them are very obvious. You got a respectable squat and a respectable sumo and a weak conventional. It can sometimes be a sign because it's something in your back limiting you. The sumo is not guaranteed to be low back though, the disparity. As a weak upper back can also cause your conventional to be weaker to your sumo if you're a strong squatter, if you have a strong squat with a wide stance. So that can be part of it. But it is one of the things that you'll notice immediately, that if you're not fat, not at a higher body weight, and those ratios are really, really close. Or again, you can take like my lifter Antonio. He can almost squat as much as he conventionals, but he sumos more than he conventionals. Weak upper back though in his case, weak upper middle back. But it's one of the things you know there's something weak in your back if this occurs. The things that you can look for a little more closely, how about when you pull your low back if you do deficit deadlifts, right? If you do deficit deadlifts and your low back hurts afterwards or you pull it, like heavy deficits, be a giveaway. Especially in the context of any of that other stuff I just described. Right? You're prone to low back pulls at all. pull your low back sometimes doing rows, right? Well, this is a weak low back, possibly weak abs too. But definitely on deficit deadlifts, right? You have weak good morning. Good morning is very weak relative to your squat. What do you mean by weak? If 50% of your 1 rep max squat for 10s on good mornings is hard or almost impossible, or you're forced to do 40% of it for 10s, go look at what you do for 10s and compare it to your squatting. Okay. We're at 50% or lower, probably a weak low back at play. How about when you miss squats? If you either fail a squat rep or you fail a max and you miss it just out of the hole. Okay, you get to the bottom, you start coming up, and a good morning's at the bottom. I'm talking about where people say, oh, a good morning squat where the hip shoot. That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about the inability when you either fail a rep and you're watching the camera, that you get this far out of the bottom, right? You get about this far above parallel, and you lean forward and lose the weight. It crashes. Now, if you finish the lift, that's different, okay, because that's two totally different things. To where a good morning's right at it after you get the weight moving, you don't just stick at the bottom. You get pulled forward and miss the lift and you get stapled. That's an indicator of a weak low back. All right. How about being weaker on a small deficit? Not only does it hurt, but you're quite a bit weaker. Let's say your conventional deadlift is 500 pounds. And off of a 1 to a 1.5 inch deficit, you can only pull 450, 455, and that is your all-out max. And you sometimes pull your low back maybe doing that. Okay, this is an indicator of a weak low back. And it's common, very common. So what are our solutions? To treat it like every other muscle. I want you to ask yourself, if our goal is to do 10 to 20 sets per week, per muscle group, and you start looking at the amount of real low back work we do, right? Because I don't mean your squats and deadlifts. And you're not in that range, you know you're neglecting it. And the low back responds more to higher reps. It responds really well to volume. So start asking questions. How many sets of good mornings are you doing? How many sets of hyper extensions? Any sort of back extension? Band pull-throughs. Romanian deadlifts. All these things. Start looking at how many total sets you're doing. Are you doing 10 to 20 hard sets a week? If you're not, you need to get on top of that. Right? You need to get on top of that. In addition to doing possibly even some extra restoration work, which would mean something like really high rep band pull-throughs, banded good mornings on your off days, reverse hypers if you have access to one. Right? It would be a good idea. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.